In the 2018 elections in the state of Virginia, Democrats managed to flip both the House and the Senate and retain the governorship. The New York Times has a good write-up about this event and the broader political shift that's happening in the suburbs across the US, and I'll link to that in the description below. Since the new blue coalition has taken power, they've passed a number of progressive laws on topics ranging from gun control, abortion rights, and LGBTQ protections. Recently, they passed the sweeping Clean Economy Act, which sets Virginia on course for 100% clean energy by 2050. Now, it's one thing to say that Virginia is on course for 100% renewable energy, but it's another to understand how they're actually going to get there. What it means for consumers and the utilities, who benefits and who gets left behind, and which energy sources are promoted, which are discouraged. Welcome to Clean Tech Change Agents, where we spend hours reading through legislation so that you don't have to. Also, we work together in the fight against climate change by learning and promoting grassroots activism. I'm Benjamin, and today we're going to dig into Virginia's recently passed Clean Economy Act to answer all of those questions. If you'd like to support our channel, you can sign up on Patreon at patreon.com/CTCA, and I'll put a link in the description below. Now, I think it's easiest to understand this act and apply it to other situations if we think about it as defining a relationship, specifically a relationship between the state of Virginia and its utilities. More specifically, we can focus on Dominion, Virginia's powerful incumbent electricity provider and the largest in the state. So this law is Virginia telling Dominion what it will do and how it will be rewarded if it does so. Getting the reward part right is so critical. Dominion is an investor-owned utility, or IOU, so the government is not contributing capital. Capital is provided by stakeholders who expect a return on their investment. Set that return too low, and capital will dry up, and it will be difficult to invest in things like grid expansion and improvement, and they may not be able to reliably provide electricity to all consumers. Set that return too high, and rates will be higher than they need to be. We see this balance in a few places in the legislation. The State Corporation Commission meets regularly to verify that costs incurred by Dominion are prudent and deserve to be recouped, and sets returns to Dominion based on the returns earned by similar utilities. Additionally, as part of the transition to renewable energy, bonus return on investment is earned from building out certain generation sources. Dominion can also earn a return by piloting and rolling out energy efficiency programs. The state requires them to assess these potential programs against several standards to find out if they are in the public interest. I want to do more research on this term, but I believe one of the outcomes of a policy being in the public interest is that it's easier for the utilities to recoup their costs. Now, the CEA explicitly states that investments in wind generation, solar generation, grid modernization, all of those are in the public interest automatically. In our last video, we talked about potential structures of renewable portfolio standards, and the CEA contains an RPS. So let's see how it's laid out. For Dominion, the long-term target is 100% renewables by 2050. And the percentage that must be made up by renewables goes up year after year. They can appeal to the Commission if onboarding of these renewables would jeopardize reliability of the grid, and they can buy carbon credits if need be. But if they fall short given those caveats, they're on the hook for what are referred to as deficiency payments, which are then invested back into things like energy efficiency programs. So here we have targets that increase over time, but give Dominion flexibility in how they're met. There are carve-outs for various fuel sources as well. The state is mandating retirement of coal-fired plants by 2024 with some exceptions, the construction of certain amounts of wind and solar, and the installation of utility-scale storage. The CEA also expands the net metering program in Virginia. Now, I need to do a whole separate video on the topic of net metering, but basically it's getting paid for electricity that you return to the grid when you generate more than you consume. For instance, with rooftop solar. This is a controversial topic because it's unclear the price that consumers should be paid for the electricity they send back to the grid. The CEA mandates that the Commission will occasionally update these rates, and the program will allow people to sign up until 6% of generation comes from consumers. Now, the reason you might want to cap this is because these consumer-driven distributed energy resources can be tough to integrate onto the grid in large amounts. This will be a major challenge for all utilities over the next several decades. And when you hear about investments in the smart grid, part of the reason you need that is to handle all these DERs coming online. Okay, last thing I want to discuss about the CEA are the social equity clauses contained throughout the law. And by that I mean identifying a group of people, usually a disadvantaged group, and making the system just a little bit more favorable for them. For instance, 1% of new net metering customers have to come from low-income households. When I talked earlier about the retirement of the coal-fired power plants, one exception to that has to do with coal mined in a certain region of Virginia. And when utilities build out the offshore wind capacity, they have to try to source those workers from Virginia first. There's even a program called the Percent of Income Payment Program, which levies a small fee from all utilities customers in order to make sure that low-income customers never have to spend more than 6% of their paycheck on electricity. Now, I'm not going to level judgment as to whether these social equity programs belong in a law primarily devoted to reaching 100% renewable energy. And whether or not you think they belong there may depend on whether you think our electricity system needs an overhaul or whether our economic system as a whole needs revision. But wherever you fall on that topic, get out there and advocate for your beliefs. That's what happened in Virginia, a state that has historically been conservative and retrograde when it comes to renewables, is now leading the way along with states like California and Washington and others. So political beliefs, political action, they matter in this fight. And if you want to say thank you to the legislators that made the Clean Economy Act a reality, I'm going to put a link in the description to the list of delegates along with their email addresses. And I bet you'll feel great for the rest of the day if you take a minute and drop them a line and say you appreciate it. Thanks for hanging with me, and I'll see you next time on Clean Tech Change Agents.